Hi, Miles Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video, I'd like to discuss an article which considered the two types of government that Liz Truss could try and lead. One would be a blood and guts die-hard Brexit cabinet of the swivelest-eyed of loons, and the other would be a more balanced group with the aim of challenging the ERG. Now, I have to say, I'm not as convinced that this is really a choice, but it is worth considering. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So when it comes to normal government, in the days when we had normal politics, a prime minister had two priorities when it came to forming their cabinet. First, they obviously wanted to get the best and brightest minds into cabinet. Certainly a lot of very able ministers who would be of the same mind in terms of delivering their agenda. You don't want cabinet ministers working against each other, in order to actually achieve their aims. But second, you do also need a disciplined parliamentary party. So you have to leave room in the cabinet for the leaders of various factions within the parliamentary party, even if they are complete dimwits. Obviously, this normal way of organising a cabinet has been abandoned ever since David Cameron left office. Theresa May attempted to create a balanced cabinet of Remainers and Leavers. The only problem was that some of the Remainers were not all that bothered about a sensible deal, and all of the Leavers were lunatics. So the cabinet was, in reality, anything but balanced. Another problem was that the ERG were in no mood for compromise. So even if cabinet could agree a compromise, the far right of the party weren't interested. And Theresa May didn't have the numbers to bypass them in parliamentary votes. That's why she went for an early general election in 2017 to try and increase her majority. Then she lost it completely. Good joke. So compromise was impossible. Then Boris Johnson took over. He had yet another idea about how to form a cabinet. He stuffed it full of people who wouldn't challenge him. Everyone knew that Johnson was a weak leader, including himself. The only competent cabinet ministers he could afford to appoint were those who lacked either the motivation or the charisma to challenge him. So Michael Gove, Ben Wallace, Robert Buckland, Sajid Javid, they were in, but the rest were absolutely hopeless. We're led to believe that the brightest stars ended up being Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss. And listening to them speak at hustings, in interviews, TV debates, you are left wondering just how bad the rest must have been. But Johnson felt he could afford to do this because he was the driving force behind their election win. He believed he could carry a cabinet of lightweights, and so did his party. Liz Truss cannot seriously claim this. If she packs her cabinet with toadies just for the sake of being toadies, she will not be able to govern. The party's split, and she's not going to unite it with a cabinet of nodding dogs. And if she doesn't unite it, she will get little done in the second half of this hopefully final parliament of Tory rule for a while. So I was reading an article by Sebastian Payne. I tend to read a few of his. It's behind a paywall, I'm afraid, in the Financial Times, but never mind. They're arguing that Truss has a choice. She could go for the full ERG cabinet. They say, for example, Ian Duncan Smith as Chief Whip, Suella Braverman, either Home Secretary or Culture Secretary to fight the culture wars, and so on, that sort of thing. They're extremists in there. And if she did this, she'd have no trouble from the ERG because they would be in cabinet deciding government policy. And they are by far the most difficult faction to deal with. When I say difficult, I mean impossible. I suppose the reasoning would be that although other factions would not be at all happy, you could potentially keep them quiet by stressing the importance of appearing united in order to win the next general election. If more sane Tory MPs believed that there was nothing for it, Truss was going to lead them into the next election, and it is vital to make the best of it, they would have no choice but to fall into line, even if they thought that this was suboptimal. Because descending into infighting is definitely the way to lose that election. The problem with this is that although it gives Truss fewer headaches in Parliament, it gives her way more in public and with international relationships. Having these far-right people in charge of government policy is going to skew them well away from where the voting population are. Brexit would quickly spiral out of control as they would insist in going ahead with the so-called bonfire of EU regulations. And I'll be talking more about that in the second video today. And this is something that Boris Johnson talked a lot about, but he wasn't actually crazy enough to go ahead with it. They also want massive tax cuts, the state shrinking right down. There'll be no telling them that if they do it too quickly, the public would notice and vote them out of office. They don't care about that. Even if they believe it could happen, they don't care. Destroy as much of the state as possible so that Labour can't reverse it in the time likely given to them, then come back to power and carry on again. That's the way they'll be thinking. It takes a lot longer to thoughtfully build than it does to mindlessly destroy. The alternative suggested by Mr. Payne in this article is that she could produce a cabinet representing the full spectrum of the parliamentary party, including some from the far right. Indeed, he says that those close to Truss insist that this is what she aims to do. But I have questions. The basis for this is that Truss can build a wide support base, so she won't have to be under the control of any one faction, in particular the far right of the party. But I have issues with this. First of all, those who backed either Rishi Sunak or Penny Mordaunt may not be minded to suddenly swing behind Liz Truss, as they see her as having either lied, made unrealistic promises, or dealt in dirty tactics in order to win the contest. I just don't see the parliamentary party swinging behind her just because she appoints a wide range of political thought into her cabinet. And also, if you've got this wide range of political thought in very polarised political times, that is likely to lead to a lot of cabinet disagreements. Because although each individual Secretary of State runs their own department, there's a lot of interplay between departments where you can get a lot of arguments taking place. Also, if Rishi Sunak isn't offered a prominent role, then the largest group of MPs will be completely unrepresented in cabinet at all. And how could she give Sunak a prominent role after the way she's slagged him off in this contest? Equally, how could Sunak accept such a role? Then there's the problem of the ERG. We're not talking about a group of MPs who can be made to behave because they're outnumbered. Truss appealed for their support in the leadership contest, and she got it. She'd been making overtures towards them for months. Ever since the new year, in fact. Basically, she's in debt to the mob, and they're not going to appreciate being sidelined. Although Truss inherits a massive majority, the ERG have the numbers to frustrate her if they are united and minded to. And finally, what would even be the point? Yes, it was a travesty that Johnson prioritised loyalty over ability in his cabinet and gave us heads of government departments that were as thick as mince. But what are brighter cabinet ministers going to do at this point? There's no way of actually governing in the normal sense with the constraints of Brexit ideology. Like, how do you grow the economy while raising trade barriers around the world? A number of Tories have talked about the way they'll stimulate the economy, but it's all nonsense. How do you deal with the cost of living crisis? The problem is that profits are out of control and wages are being depressed. The Tories can argue as much as they like that the problem is people asking for more money in wages. That's not the problem. So the solution is to rein in profits and boost wages. But it's not that difficult. But it flies in the face of Tory ideology. They're not going to do it. So they're not going to deal with the cost of living crisis. They'll just put sticking plasters in place. How do you deal with the NHS melting down? They don't want it to. They want it to fail. They don't want it to not melt down. They want to get rid of the NHS and replace it with an unregulated private insurance scheme, just like in the US where healthcare stinks. But it's highly profitable for people who might donate to the Tory party. Wherever you look at a problem, you see solutions that the Conservatives cannot bring themselves to adopt. So they deliberately misdiagnose the problem. They deny the problems that actually exist and either overstate other problems or just make them up. Lefty lawyers, people kneeling down, BBC comedy shows. It's the BBC comedy shows, that's why the country's in a mess. Whatever, anything to avoid accurately identifying the problem because you don't want to apply the obvious solution. And bright cabinet ministers, you get the best and brightest in. What are they going to do if they cannot accurately identify the problem, either because they're not allowed or because they don't allow themselves to? Doesn't matter how clever they are, they're not going to apply the right solutions. So whether Truss goes all in with the ERG or tries to go for wider support, the difference is likely to be in terms of internal Tory party management. I don't see any way to actually govern with their childish and selfish ideology. I'd actually love to know what Liz Truss genuinely thinks she can achieve as Prime Minister. Or like Johnson before her, did she just want to achieve being Prime Minister and has never thought further ahead than that? But those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, please click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, the join button for memberships. And until next time, I'll see you later.